Joining us to examine the calls for the EFCC Chairman's resignation and other issues related to the Osun election, we have a legal practitioner, Toho Oseruwaja. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us to talk about what's been happening in Osun State for the last couple of days now. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Lekon.
Yes, you're welcome. So, yes, of course. Now, first, the EFCC said it moved to preserve Osun State funds after detecting suspicious movements of cash. What is your assessment of this justification alongside other reasons given for the freezing of the state's accounts?
Let me start with the general phrase that there is no time appropriate. There is no appropriate time to stop any crime at all, irrespective of who is affected or the people involved. So the time does not matter. But in the issue of this Osun State, I would want to refer to my principal, my principal, Mr. Tajuddin Fusho, when he was given, most times if he's given opportunity to discuss about corruption in Nigeria and the anti-graft agency, he advocates for such agencies to be managed by legal practitioners who will be able to know the rules and regulations, the do's and don'ts, and work within the confines of the law. And I believe if he's listening to me now, he will be ashamed when I think some of us were happy when the current EFCC chairman was appointed, who we adjudged to be a legal practitioner. Though we should not also disregard Waziri, I think one of the EFCC chairman, who was also a legal practitioner. So, but if you look at the output of anti-graft agency now, Pari Passu is a sister agency that is managed by Senior Advocate of Nigeria, the ICPC now. Some of us bury our head in shame when we see the modus operandi has not declined, but it's nothing to write home about when you see that it's headed by a legal practitioner. Then for the Osun State, one, I think if we look at the Money Laundering Act 2022 and the argument of counsel for and against, you discover that that particular section 7, which EFCC is hanging on, does not deal with state government, does not deal with state apparatus. I will put it clear. If you look at that section 7, subsection 6, which I believe they've gotten the court order, we'll look at the judicial involvement in this. You should understand that state finances are managed by law. State finances are managed by law. They are appropriated for. They are put in the budget. Any other institution that ought to check such issue, we are not talking about the individual of the governor now. We are talking about state fund. Any institution entrusted by law to checkmate the excesses of the state fund as a whole is the State House of Assembly by virtue of Section 121 of the by virtue of Section 121 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Remember, this is not an account of an individual. This is not an account of Adeleke, which is the current governor now. We're talking about state fund. So for the EFCC to have jumped through that process to go and secure a court order, I think is something we should be worried about. It's something we should be worried about. Remember, they are not investigating the governor, they are investigating the states. So the first question that will be asked to the EFCC chairman is that money or the spending, is it appropriated for? If the answer is yes or no, there are processes they need to go to probe those who are responsible for such this thing. But freezing the state account, I think, is something the Public Interest Committee of the MPA should look into before it gets out of hand.
And now, regardless of whether, even if the EFCC obtained a court order, many Nigerians are actually questioning the timing of the freeze because it's coming just days before the election. You are stating that the procedural angle to it is where the anti-graft agency can be faulted, but the timing, you don't have an issue with it. But then looking at the fact that this is coming a few days before election, so doesn't that timing reinforce the perception that the action may have been politically motivated?
Let me rephrase my statement again. I'm not, like I stated, the general rule is that there is no appropriate time, even if it is 24 hours to an election, for a crime to be stopped, or from a crime to be investigated, or for an arrest to be made. But if we look at it holistically, what we are saying is that, and for me, it's a personal opinion, I've read the law because I've looked at the law, I've looked at the argument of the EFCC, and I'm trying to fathom the reason behind the court's granting such an order. If there is a court order, do you understand? For the court to have granted such an order via ex parte, but I am also aware that when it comes to state finances, state accounts, EFCC lacks that power. So it's actually, they lack the power. I'm not even talking about the procedure.
Okay.
Because if you look at the Money Laundering Act, it talks about individual. It talks about private institutions or private entity. And it talks about non-financial business organization. And the state government, I'm not talking about the state governor. Let's distinguish this now. I'm not talking about the state government, state governor. I'm talking about the state government account. I think it's something we need to relook holistically again. Then for Olukoyede, the EFCC chairman, my personality towards him changed when the way he came out regarding the issue of the former governor of Kogi State. That is where I begin to question his motive, and I begin to see where the EFCC is going. Then he now put it on again when he came out to talk about the Jerry Eze, how he was investigated. That is another thing again. Then you look at what happened in Calabar again. You will now see that calling for his resignation is far overdue. As a matter of fact, if it were to be an insane society where institutions are allowed to run, he would have resigned, or he would have been kicked out long with this incident I've just mentioned now. Other incidents we have on record regarding him, the way he's positioning, his disposure towards issues, I think is long overdue.
Okay.
And I think I joined the others where they call for his resignation or they call for his sack. Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to come to him in a bit, but then let's still look at the institution and look at it from this angle, the angle of the human rights lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, absolving the EFCC, so to speak, and even the position of, Ola Olukoyede of wrongdoing. He actually even criticized the president based on his reaction. But you are saying that, fine, he lacks the judicial knowledge to handle such cases. But then Falana is saying that the EFCC acted within its statutory mandates. So where do we place it now in terms of EFCC lacking powers to, adjudicate over a matter like this?
First of all, we should understand, I don't want to join issue with a senior advocate of Nigeria.
No, it's his position. I'm even focused about his position on this.
About his position,
yeah.
But I want to differ from his position. Like I said, if you look at the provision of the law EFCC is operating within, does not talk about a state. Like, let's look at it. Are you saying that the EFCC can freeze the federal government accounts? The first question, if you want to, let's look at it. But it's an independent,
that's a supposedly independent institution that should be able to carry out the statutory rights.
Wait, I'm just telling you now, can the EFCC freeze the federal government accounts? The answer is no. Do you understand? But the EFCC can go after individuals who have converted government finances into their private personal use. If we had gotten the information that the EFCC freeze freeze money traced to the governor from the state accounts, that is correct by the Money Laundering Act and the EFCC Act. That is correct. If the news would have come that the account they freeze belonged to an ally of the governor or one of the commissioner, it would have been different. But freezing a state account, I'll refer the learners to the section of the Constitution, section 120. Then if you also read section 121, you discover that issues of state spending, issue of state allocation ought to be an issue that procedures are met. They are issue of law. So you cannot say the EFCC will step in to stop a law from operating in a state. That is not within the powers of the EFCC. I'm not saying, yes, the court would have granted such an order, but the question is we should be careful if such an order ought to be granted ex parte in the context we are looking at the issue. Then for the president to have stepped in, what will you blame the president for stepping in? When did we start having stronger institution and weaker individual? We have a stronger individual and weaker institution. But let's assume we have a stronger institution. The president is the commander-in-chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And when he sees something that is wrong by an agency or by his appointee, or an agency controlled by the federal government, the president has the right to put a stop in the executive order. You know, we have the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative arm of government. They checkmate themselves. So if the president has given the EFCC order to stop what they are doing, it is expected, or what the learned six should look at. Do the EFCC just went to the bank and withdraw such order? The question is, if the answer is yes, is within the privilege of the EFCC to do that, because one thing is the court to grant an order, the other thing is for the executive to execute such an order. But if that order has been executed, the next thing is for the executive to go back to the judiciary for such order to be what? To be terminated. So there are procedure, but the president is within the confines of the right to have ordered the EFCC to stop what is wrong.
So it doesn't make the EFCC independent then? It doesn't make the EFCC independent then?
No, it's not about the independency of the EFCC. Lincoln, I will give you instances of situation where the people of Nigeria call on the president, like the EFCC chairman. Why are they calling on the president to sack him? Administrative procedure. Why are they not calling on the president to sack him or accept his resignation? There is already, the president said, oh, what you are doing is wrong. And from all intent and purpose, from the legal view I've read and from what I've heard, or for the laws I've looked over this issue, the EFCC was wrong. So if the president says, stop it, this is not the right process. What is expected of the EFCC is to look inward and activate the legal proceedings they use in activating abnormalities in the system. So it is not, it does not interrupt with their power.
All
the
right.
president of US can stop, they can ask the FBI to stop a proceedings which he believes that is wrong. They understand. It's like for the FBI to say, okay, no, we are not doing this and we are not doing that. But another thing again, every one of us, and with all intent and purpose, that this procedure is wrong in law.
Okay. All right. Toho Seriwaja, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. It's always nice having this kind of conversations with you on the news.